This week marks 30 years since the Welsh language television channel S4C began broadcasting. Now on Radio 4, the afternoon drama tells the story of its turbulent political birth. When Margaret Thatcher's government abandoned its manifesto pledge to establish the channel, the Welsh nationalist Gwynfor Evans challenged the Prime Minister to a political duel by gambling with his life. Gwynfor versus Margaret by Rob Gittins.
Materion cymdeithasol ac economaidd sydd yn bwysicach o lawer I ganolbwyntio arnyn nhw erbyn hyn.
Dwi'n meddwl dyna ni fynd yn ôl at pobl.
Plaid Cymru Executive Committee Meeting, Aberystwyth, 3rd of May, 1980. The meeting is being conducted in the oldest surviving European language, Welsh.
Ond mae rhaid I ni ddadbwysio bod hyn mor bwysig, mae hwn di'r peth pwysica sydd
For the
rhaid I
purpose
ni.
of this drama, all exchanges have been translated into English.
For this new electoral term.
Plaid Executive Committee member David Ellis-Thomas is speaking.
Well, I'm sure we all have places to be, beds to get to. So if there's nothing under any other business...
Just one matter, David.
Mr. Gwynfor Evans.
As you know, the government led by Prime Minister Thatcher has recently reneged on its manifesto promise to establish a Welsh language television channel.
Shame. Dreadful.
I'd now like to call on the government to honour that promise.
Gwynfor.
If you just let me
We
finish.
have already debated this many times.
If they refuse to do so, I intend to embark on a hunger strike. I shall begin my fast at the beginning of October, and if they maintain their refusal, I shall maintain my fast till death. And I'd now like to invite you all to support me in this.
Later, much later, David Ellis-Thomas would reflect that it was probably only Gwynfor who would raise the matter of starving himself to death under any other business.
For 35 years, he has been the pole star of Welsh nationalism, leading Plaid
Not unkind, though, to describe Gwynfor Evans as a fanatic, since for something
Around
like
him at
50 years,
Llangadog, he feels an affinity with a romantic past.
pursued unrelentingly a single political objective. Now he plans to die for it.
Gwynfor versus Margaret. A true story. The previous 12 months had seen 3 hammer blows strike Plaid Cymru, and Gwynfor in particular.
In the Carmarthen seat, first won for Plaid Cymru by Mr. Gwynfor Evans in 1966, Mr. Evans's vote has plummeted by over 8,000 in his defeat to Labour.
The Welsh nation has voted overwhelmingly against a separate Welsh Assembly. 47% of those who voted against the Wales Bill. So devolution for Wales, at least for the moment, is dead.
The Home Secretary, Mr. William Whitelaw, has abandoned the government's manifesto pledge to establish a Welsh language television channel. Mr. Whitelaw stated the government's view that the interests of the Principality would be best served by maintaining...
So this is Christmas, and what have you done?
Christmas, 1979. 4 months before Gwynfor announces his hunger strike.
Gwynfor, the grandchildren are waiting.
I just have to finish this.
It's their favourite programme. They want you to watch it with them. Oh, not another poison pen letter. It's Christmas. Don't they ever give up?
Latest report on the licence campaign. 300 signatures so far. 300 people who pledged not to pay their TV licence. That's really going to put Whitelaw off his bread sauce and stuffing.
It's a start. Better than nothing.
The Tories take back all they promised, and what do? Man the barricades? Storm the Bastille? We withhold our checkbooks. What's on anyway? What are we watching?
The Muppets.
Well, why didn't you say?
New Year's Day, 1980. The dawn of a new decade. Gwynfor and Rhiannon take the grandchildren on a trip to the reservoir at Tryweryn.
Haven't been here for years.
Not a lot to see now, is there?
So why have we come?
There used to be a rather pretty village, as I recall. Now look, Just rather a lot of water.
The city of Liverpool against the village of Kelly'n was always going to be David and Goliath.
David won, didn't he?
That was a very long time ago.
Or maybe he didn't compromise.
Oh, not those letters again.
Too willing to compromise. An unwillingness to be adventurous.
Gwynfor.
A lack of purpose. Cowardice.
It's been a bad few months. You're the party president. They're just taking it out on you.
I compromised on this place. You know that and I know it. The call to arms sounded, the bugle blew, and what did I do? I passed a resolution.
What could you do?
And an entire village was flooded.
You went through all the proper
A community
channels.
lost.
What was left? What is all this?
If I decided to do something to force the channel issue to a head, something to try and force the government to change its mind.
Like what?
I'll only do it if you support me. No one else knows about this. You say no, and no one ever will.
I don't understand. What?
We lose the channel. We lose the language. And no, not tomorrow. No, not next year. But we'll have done nothing. Nothing to halt the slow decline. Which means lose it we will. And when all the generations to come try to understand this generation, our generation, try and understand how and why we did it, how and why we finally squandered the inheritance, let the language drown. They'll all say the same. By sitting back and doing nothing.
What do you mean? Are you going to walk into the Welsh office with a loaded gun?
In a manner of speaking.
You don't believe in loaded guns. You never have. I'll never kill for a cause. It was one of the first things you ever said to me.
I didn't say I wouldn't die for one.
Gwynfor.
Tell me not to do this, and I won't. Say no, and it'll be forgotten.
May the 4th, 1980. News of Gwynfor's hunger strike is about to hit Whitehall.
Home Secretary.
Nick, I really need to be in the house.
Yeah, I rather think you should hear this first.
Oh, not another wicket.
The latest Welsh news.
Nick, you're the Secretary of State for Wales. You do Welsh affairs. I'm the Home Secretary. I do cricket.
This won't take a minute. It's about the Welsh television channel.
There is no Welsh television channel, and never will be.
Yes. It's only... Gwynfor Evans. He's rather gone and threatened to starve himself to death if there isn't.
Is he serious?
This is Gwynfor. I don't think he's ever anything else.
And what's been the reaction?
A couple of wags in the Welsh office have offered to sponsor him.
What spectacular good taste.
Do you think we should take this upstairs?
You have her number, as do I. And you are, as I said, Nick, responsible for Welsh affairs.
It's probably just a flash in the pan.
Really?
Mark my words, a 6-day wonder.
The hill fort of Garngoch, Gwynfor's spiritual retreat in West Wales.
Rhiannon said I'd find you up here.
Is there any finer place, David? Look over there, the ancient seat of Lord Rhys de Neville.
Gwynfor.
And there, the birthplace of Thomas John of Llansadwr.
Yes,
And
Gwynfor,
down there, the village of Bethlehem. People come from all over to have their Christmas cards franked in that post office. Did you know that?
This fast of yours.
Have we had a response from number 10?
Not even an acknowledgement.
Oh.
A few of us have been talking, some of the executive. Look, none of us wants to go gentle into that good night. We all understand that, but...
I met him once, you know.
What?
Dylan. Right at the start of the war. As a poet, the man was an angel. As a man...
Gwynfor, I'm not here to talk about
Have
Dylan
you read
Thomas.
Do Not Go Gentle?
And I'm not here to talk about poetry
Everyone always seems to think it's a lament for his father, but it's so much more than that. Look at all those men he writes about. The wise men, the grave men, the wild men, the good men, all cursed at the end of their lives by that most tortured of emotions. And do you know what that is, David? The most tortured of any emotion?
What?
Regret.
You wanted to see me, Home Secretary?
Have a read of this, Nick. Draft of a speech we've drawn up.
When are you giving it?
You are. The salient paragraph is on page 2, by the way.
£1.5 million?
To be earmarked specifically for Welsh medium education. A rock-solid foundation for a policy of ongoing and general support, wouldn't you say?
I would, Home Secretary.
You will. There, look, it's on page 4. Let them say we don't support their language now, after pumping in £1.5 million to help the little ones master their mutations.
Has to help with the Gwynfor question, too.
That never occurred to me.
It never occurred to me that it would, Home Secretary.
5 months to go. Gwynfor gives his first major interview since announcing his hunger strike, making it clear that his fast will now take place at his home in Carmarthenshire, and not, as originally planned, at the Plaid Cymru offices in Cardiff.
I'll take up residence in my library there. I'll have my books to provide me with some nourishment at least, including 6 books I've always wanted to read on Gandhi. And like Gandhi, I'll be putting salt and soda in my drinks to keep me going as long as possible. And to support me, I will have all my family, of course. One of the hardest things is to think of leaving them. But we're so close, it won't be too difficult
for the children or Rhiannon to stand up by standing together. The only unsettling thing may be the smell of cooking drifting in from the kitchen. And my favourite meal in particular, new potatoes, gammon, pineapple and peas.
After consulting with colleagues, Cledwyn Hughes, the former Labour MP and now Labour peer, calls to see Home Secretary William Whitelaw and Secretary of State Nicholas Edwards with the opposition's analysis of the ongoing deadlock.
Well, Willie, I think you're being well and truly shafted.
I think the parliamentary term is outmanoeuvred, Cledwyn.
No, I prefer Cledwyn's assessment, Nick. Shafted. Have you read that blasted interview?
Really was beautifully judged. We've been political opponents for more than 40 years, but even I couldn't help warming to him.
Have we had any press coverage of our education initiative?
Not a lot.
Well, you wouldn't, not after Gammon Gate.
What exactly did you want to say us about Cledwyn?
To find out what you're going to do. We on the Labour benches are getting as anxious about this as you.
What can we do?
We don't exactly have a lot of room for manoeuvre.
Not with Gwynfor, clearly.
And not with Margaret either.
Can't she be persuaded to,
What? These are early days, Cledwyn. Who knows what kind of Prime Minister Margaret will turn out to be, but somehow I don't see her throwing in the towel to a pensioner from Wales.
We have actually already offered a solution to all this.
Ah, yes.
We've offered to review the broadcasting situation inside the year. We've even offered to set up a committee to do
Nick.
that. Maybe you could chair it,
Nick.
Cledwyn. Home Secretary?
Gwynfor's rejected it.
We only faxed it to him this morning.
That dude is like fax machines. Everything's so immediate. At least the Royal Mail would have given us a few days' grace. I think you'd better speak to him, Nick, face to face. Offer Gwynfor the opportunity to freely and fully air his views, then lay down the law.
28th of June, 1980. 4 months to go. A huge rally in support of Gwynfor takes place in Aberystwyth. A group of Congregationalist ministers occupy the Army firing range at Epynt, and Plaid Cymru finally receive a reply from Downing Street regarding a meeting between Gwynfor and the Prime Minister. Mrs. Thatcher said she could see no useful purpose in such an encounter.
Hello?
In here.
I've just seen Meg.
From the Red Lion? How is she?
Curiously embarrassed.
Oh?
She's just taken a block booking.
A Cardi embarrassed at making money as the world stood on its head. Rhiannon, what is it?
For the whole of October.
Ah.
And for most of November, too. Just in case, the young lady from the Press Association said. Oh, they'll be camping out on our doorstep, Gwynfor, like vultures.
It'll all be over well before then. Now, tell her to be sure to get a good deposit.
If it was you, if you were Whitelaw or Thatcher, I was talking to Gitto, and the way he sees it, the government's damned if it does and damned if it doesn't.
We've clearly raised a very bright son.
So, if they're damned anyway...
Why not stick it out? Is that what you're saying? Gwynfor Evans?
I was going to say they may as well give in.
Yes? Yeah, of course. Yeah, goodbye. I've just been called to the Welsh office.
Can I break to you what may be a somewhat unpalatable truth?
Secretary of State?
Despite any ambitions you may secretly foster, despite any fond hopes you might nurture, you are not, repeat not, Gandhi. Apart from the fact you look very silly in a loincloth, he fasted for world peace. Well, peace in India anyway. You're fasting for what? Television. Television? The most sophisticated way man has yet devised to sell baked beans. Look, nail your colours to a mast if you have to, but to sacrifice yourself on the altar of Procter & Gamble... She's not going to do it. You do know that, don't you? She won't give in. She can't.
Can I show you something, Secretary of State?
Is this a bribe, Gwynfor?
Take it, please.
We live in straitened times, I know, but a government minister really should command slightly more than £5.
What is it, in truth? A worthless piece of paper. What gives it any value at all are 6 simple words. Those words, in fact, just that. I promise to pay the bearer. Actually, no. There are just 2 words that give this piece of paper value. I promise.
Gwynfor.
From time immemorial, before men could even write things down, this is what they did. They made promises, the basis of all civilized exchange. It's all I'm asking, Nick. Not the moon, not the stars, not all the riches in Christendom. All I want you to do is one simple thing. Please, Nick, keep your promise.
July 1980. 3 months to go.
Mrs. Thatcher is by now fully used to being met by demonstrators, but no one expected the ferocity of the protest as she arrived at the Anglesey aluminium smelter. There were only 80 protesters, but they succeeded in giving the Prime Minister a very rough time. Many threw themselves in front of the police cars, while others hammered on the Prime Minister's car and threw eggs.
Despite her visit to Wales, Thatcher still refuses to meet with Gwynfor. In Swansea, hundreds of police officers fight with nationalists, their ranks swollen for the first time in Gwynfor's campaign by new supporters from the trade unions.
The government looks to be in for a long, hot summer.
Oh, pleasure.
Have you read this, Willie? They appear to have unleashed something of a firestorm. Oh, and this bit I particularly like. It is to be hoped that Nicholas Edwards, Secretary of State for Wales, has made it clear to his colleagues in the Cabinet that Gwynfor Evans is one of the few men from whom such a threat can be taken seriously. What do you think this is, Willie? The rantings of Red Robbo? The latest press release from the Socialist Workers' Party?
By your tone, I gather not.
The Times, Home Secretary, the London Times, today's editorial in the good old Thunderer.
Do excuse me, Cledwin, I must get on.
Does seem to be gathering support from all quarters, doesn't he?
As you say.
But he will, because he's a deeply likeable man. One of those rare, kind and gentle souls who sees the best in everyone. So, everyone tends to warm to him.
Well, he didn't seem to warm to Nick.
A kind and gentle soul, I said, Home Secretary, not a saint. Just your luck, eh, Willie? If only he was a ranting Fenian. Or what's that chap who started to make waves up in Yorkshire? Oh, yes, a Scargill.
Well, it's not good enough.
I did my best, Home Secretary. He just kept going on and on about promises, the importance of, the sanctity thereof.
Deeply unfashionable stance for a politician.
Deliver everything we promise, it's unheard of.
I was being ironic, Nick.
I really did try everything, Willie.
Yes, I appreciate that.
I even used your line.
What?
About television and baked beans.
I was going to use that in my speech to conference.
Really? I didn't know. I did add one little refinement, though, a small improvement, if I might say.
Oh?
I told him to nail his colours to a mast if he had to, but not to sacrifice himself on the altar of Procter & Gamble.
Cross and Blackwell.
I'm sorry?
Cross and Blackwell make baked beans. Procter & Gamble make shoe polish.
Ah.
And disposable nappies. Are we getting in trouble here, Nick?
18th of July, 1980. In Abergavenny, at the home of Secretary of State Nicholas Edwards, his children go to bed, watched over by their grandmother. After the children have gone to sleep, and under the cover of darkness, a bomb is placed through the window of the bedroom where Edwards' 16-year-old son is sleeping.
The special branch has been called in by Welsh police officers investigating 2 attempted firebomb attacks on the home of the Welsh Secretary and a Conservative club. Neither bomb went off. The police were warned of them by an anonymous phone caller.
We must condemn this immediately, David. We must issue a statement straight away.
And that's it. That's all.
What else can we do?
You can stop this madness. Call off this fast. Admit you've made an error of judgment. Look what's happening. Look at the mayhem you're unleashing.
In other words, go back on all I've said.
It's the ultimate irony, can't you see that? You, the lifelong pacifist.
I'm still a pacifist. I've never encouraged or incited anyone to commit violence.
No, you just whip them up into a frenzy, hand them a live grenade, then stand back and say, well, I really didn't expect them to throw it. And if you do go ahead, if the democratically elected government of the day decides not to back down to the demands of a single unelected man, if you die, Gwynfor, don't forget it's us that have to pick up the pieces.
I'm one man, David. One life. Against a language that survived hundreds, if not thousands of years.
And will continue to do so.
I will not do it again, David. I will not stand back and let another Tryweryn happen before my eyes. I will not stand here in 10, 20 years' time with the same bitter regrets.
And that's what this is really all about, isn't it?
What?
This whole country could go up in flames. And all because an old man has regrets. Home Secretary.
Nick, come in. How are you?
As well as one can be, when one's family has almost been blown up.
Margaret wants you to know how deeply upset she is about all that, as am I.
This has got to stop, Willie.
This has led to a great deal of soul-searching, Nick, on both our parts. Soul-searching which has reinforced our determination to stand firm. To not give in to violence. To insist Gwynfor is the one who sees sense and gives way. I'm sure you agree.
Of course.
You've an interview coming up on the BBC, haven't you?
That's right.
Margaret suggested you could make that clear.
It's got something called chlorivite M in it. That's it. That's the one. And we need some glucose. And something with vitamin E in it, too. Yes, if you can include those two. Thank you. Goodbye, then.
All a bit new age, Rhiannon?
David, I didn't know you were still here.
Never had you down as a pills and potions sort of woman?
Oh, Gwynfor had a letter this morning from Linford.
And what did the good professor have to say?
He sent him a wall chart detailing all the supplements he should take when he begins his fast. To prolong things as much as possible.
Rhiannon, I really can't imagine what this is like for you. I know what it's like for the rest of us, even trying to imagine the party without Gwynfor.
It won't be like anything, David, because it won't happen. They will back down. They have to.
August 1980. 2 months to go. In one of the most highly politicised national eisteddfods in living memory, cars belonging to the Welsh office are vandalised, and the Independent Broadcasting Authority stand is totally destroyed. That same night, the Secretary of State for Wales, Nicholas Edwards, appears on Panorama.
Let me read to you, and let me read to Mr. Evans if he's watching, a letter I have received from Dr. Roger Thomas, the MP for Carmarthen, Mr. Evans's former seat, before the electorate decided he should not represent them any longer. I can assure you that the voice of the loud, vociferous minority in Wales is no true reflection of the feeling on this matter, particularly among Welsh speakers. I have questioned literally hundreds in my constituency on this matter. Let the government also be absolutely clear about this. We will not give in to violence. We will not give in to threats, and we will not give in to blackmail.
September 1980. 1 month to go. Thousands take to the streets of Cardiff in a demonstration of support for Gwynfor. Earlier in the day, the legendary Welsh activist Saunders Lewis publishes an article calling on supporters to use violence if necessary. In an interview in The Guardian, given on September the 1st, 1980, his 68th birthday, Gwynfor appears to regard the hunger strike as now inevitable.
I really can't see Mrs. Thatcher yielding on this. I simply can't see the government backing down. So I'm ready to die. But if and when I do, I predict a tremendous upsurge in Welsh nationalism. Perhaps we cannot survive as a nation if there is not. Something very big has to happen if we are to live, and I can see this fast leading to something very, very big in Wales.
Something very big has to happen if we are to live, and I can see this fast leading to something very, very big in Wales.
And not just in Wales. Now look at this. It was faxed over this morning from sources in the Emerald Isle.
Mr. Evans's hunger strike is fast becoming the sole topic of conversation among the prisoners in Long Kesh. Intense interest is being taken in the Republican community in his actions and in the government's response.
We give in to Gwynfor, and every hot-headed extremist will scent blood.
Yes, but it's not that.
Not my words, Nick. Margaret's. We're rather getting wedged between a rock and a hard place on this one, aren't we?
On the one hand, Wales, on the other hand, Ireland.
I was talking about Margaret and Gwynfor.
Does she really want to be the kind of Prime Minister who sits back and watches a man die? If you were Prime Minister, if you were faced with all this,
would I give in?
Would you be more receptive to the possibility of a solution?
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
But that's maybe why I'm not Prime Minister. If Gwynfor was asking for anything other than a climb down,
a U-turn.
We are in trouble, Nick. Unfortunately, so is he.
With 3 weeks to go, Gwynfor receives an unexpected visitor.
Gwynfor, thank you for seeing me.
Thank you for taking an interest in our little protest, Gledwyn.
Hardly little, my friend, and I would like to think we are friends, despite more than 40 years battling each other on everything from farmers' subsidies to domestic jam making.
Not to mention the sighting of that public urinal in Pontry 20 Guide.
You also know me well enough to accept that I'm not here as an emissary from the Home Office. So far as your not-so-little protest is concerned, I have a proposal, a compromise.
No, Gledwyn.
Sorry?
Whatever else you've come to say, whatever idea or proposal you wish to discuss, please understand that on this issue there will be no compromise.
Will you at least listen?
Yes.
Rhiannon.
For my sake, for the family's sake, please, Gwynfor, at least listen.
Good of you to see me, Home Secretary. Nick?
You've talked to Gwynfor?
Yes.
And?
And, if you're agreeable, I think we can resolve this matter pretty well immediately.
I'm delighted to hear it.
I'm astonished.
Thank you, Nick.
This is my proposal. Needless to say, it's been read and approved by Gwynfor. I'll leave you for a few moments to read it yourselves. Hopefully it will meet with your joint approval also, and all this will be at an end.
When do you think we'll hear?
Should be any time now.
How long does it take to read a single piece of paper, for heaven's sake?
Gledwin.
Home Secretary. Nick.
Thank you for your intervention.
Yes, thank you, Cledwin.
I'm aware it may cause you some difficulty, Home Secretary. I'm aware this involves the government giving way on the substantive issue of a single Welsh language channel. But by making it clear that this is a trial, that the channel will be established for an experimental period only, the government retains the clear right to revert to its original proposal. It doesn't cede the elected government's rights to an ultimate decision. It doesn't hand Gwynfor an outright victory, and it doesn't create a martyr.
That'll be Gitto and Shan. The rest of the children are on their way to...
There's really no need.
You're their father, Gwynfor. Need doesn't come into it.
Hello?
Gwynfor, it's Cledwin.
Cledwin.
They've just come back to me.
And?
It's a no, Gwynfor.
No.
Oh.
I'm sorry, Gwynfor. She just won't budge. There's nothing more I can do.
An amor apyddor mynydd sydd yn cuddio bromeirionydd.
In the end, though, the decision is an individual one. Admiration for another man in another country doesn't necessarily give you the resolve to undertake a grim, prolonged way of death, looking out of the window, listening to your family moving all around you in the house. In the end, can he do it?
David has just called. He's asked if he can come over.
You can take a look at this.
What is it?
An idea I've been working on, a new initiative. I was visiting Minor and Fred last week, and it struck me. 3 years ago, there wasn't a single English child at their school. Today, there's more and more. We have to reach out to them, Rhiannon. They must not feel excluded. We must make them feel at home, in our language and in theirs. Educate the children and their parents. Well, what do you think?
And who'll lead this initiative, Gwynfor? Who'll put all this into practice?
Oh, Rhiannon.
I will not break. I will not.
No one doubts your sincerity, Gwynfor, your courage. But the cause... We have workers losing their livelihoods today, this minute, in Llanwern, in Port Talbot, in Shotton, steel workers, miners, tin plate workers facing ruin. We're talking about the survival of families, entire communities, issues that provoke real passion, real fire. It's rather difficult to feel that same level of passion for Super Ted.
Do you know why Super Ted was created, David?
Gwynfor, please, not another history lesson. This is important.
To help the Creator's son overcome his fear of the dark. I'd call that important, wouldn't you?
It's not what I'm talking about.
It's exactly what I'm talking about. I hear all you're saying, David. Do you think I've not rehearsed all the same arguments myself? That I don't sometimes wonder what I'm doing this for? Back-to-back episodes of quiz shows? Cookery programs? But what I do know is young children will grow up in a world where those quiz shows and cookery programs will be in their language, the language their parents speak, not the language they believe they have to speak to make their voices heard. My language and yours, David. Coming out of a simple box in a living room, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year, talking about everything and anything from the sublime to the mundane, the profound to the trivial. The sort of television they have just a few miles away across that border, reflecting themselves back to themselves. And no, I can't see into the future. But it's not us who'll be carrying that torch, is it? We have to trust the next generation. The ones who'll grow up watching that simple box in the living room, listening to their language as they should be listening to it, not in the classroom, not as an object of study in some university somewhere pored over by scholars, but as the currency of everyday living, the bedrock of everyday life.
And that's your last word?
My first and last, my old friend.
September the 17th, 1980. 2 weeks to go. Secretary of State Nicholas Edwards meets Home Secretary William Whitelaw for lunch.
Nick, glad you could join me.
Always happy to break bread with the Home Secretary.
We're having the lamb, actually.
I was speaking metaphorically.
And I'd like to speak hypothetically.
Oh?
How long has it been since we met with Gledwin?
Almost a week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the news from Wales. Oh, do take some of these roast parsnips, Nick. They really are rather good.
No news from Wales, I'm afraid. Gwynfor seems to be sticking to his guns.
As we must stick to ours.
Of course.
Any suggestion of any sort of climb down would be unthinkable.
Absolutely.
But I've been thinking, and speaking completely hypothetically, of course, I suppose Gwynfor's not actually asking us to, is he? Peace?
Oh, thank you. So, what actually is he asking, Home Secretary?
He's not asking us to change our mind. He's simply asking us to go back to what we previously decided. In other words, and in what I suppose you'd call the parlance of the day, he's not asking for a U-turn, he's simply asking for a double U-turn.
Right.
And following the logic of that through, if one performs a double U-turn, doesn't one end up in the direction one was originally facing? Gravy?
Thank you.
Speaking, as I said, completely hypothetically, of course.
But surely, Margaret...
Take some spinach. Keep our strength up.
With lunch over, Edwards and Whitelaw travel to number 10.
Hello?
Rhiannon, it's David Ale.
Hello, David.
I'm beginning to hear some very curious rumours.
The Home Secretary and the Secretary of State for Wales to see the Prime Minister. I'm rather beginning to wish I hadn't had that lamb.
Oh, mine was very good.
Nothing wrong with mine either. Just rather puts me in mind of slaughter. Margaret, how are you?
Gwynfor, I've had a call from David Ale.
I've just had a journalist on the phone. He's heard the same story. I'm trying Cledwin now. See if he...
Hello?
Cledwin, do you know anything about these rumours from the Home Office?
Gwynfor?
Could you hang on a minute?
A car's pulled up on the drive.
Well, maybe it's...
I'll go and find out.
Cledwin?
I've heard the rumours, Gwynfor. I haven't had them confirmed, though. I've put in calls to Willie and to Nick, but I've not heard anything from either.
Rhiannon's coming back. Who is it?
Gwynfor, there's a gentleman here to serve you a summons for non-payment of a television licence.
At our age, listening to Westminster tittle-tattle, eh?
Gwynfor.
It's true what they say, Cledwin. There's no fool like an old fool.
Put the television on, Gwynfor.
What?
Put it on.
Language campaigners win. They'll have their own television service on the new 4th channel.
I think the old fools won.
Good evening. The government has given way to the pressure from the Welsh language enthusiasts to put a Welsh language television service on the new 4th channel instead of splitting it between BBC Two and ITV.
On the same day, Nicholas Edwards releases a statement of his own, making it clear that
this change has been made in response not to violence, but to moderate opinion following very wide consultations in Wales.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, as a postscript to this eventful day, let me end as I started by quoting Owen Glendower, that Welsh 15th century hero still at large in the hills. Shakespeare had Hotspur and Henry IV say of him, "Oh, he is as a tired horse, a railing wife, worse than a smoky house." Considering Gwynfor Evans tonight, John, you can take your pick as to what Willie Whitelaw is thinking.
Tricky one there, Vincent.
I don't understand.
There's nothing to understand, Gwynfor. You've won, they lost. It's as simple as that.
Have we got the figures on the channel's funding?
They're here, Gwynfor. I've been through them. We could have hoped for more, of course, but they're perfectly adequate.
Read them again. Read everything they're saying. There has to be some sort of catch.
David, could you please?
Why have they done this? All of a sudden? There has to be a reason.
Of course there's a reason.
And that is?
Because, Gwynfor, no one wants you to die.
on the 17th of September, at a rally in West Wales and with just days to go, Gwynfor revokes his threat to fast to death. A huge crowd chants his name for a full 15 minutes. Similar scenes are replicated at rallies the length and breadth of Wales over the course of the following month. In London, perhaps the most memorable slogan in the history of Welsh nationalism appears on the embankment wall opposite the House of Commons. Gwynfor 1, Whitelaw 0. But the real victory, as everyone knew, was against Margaret. A few days after conceding defeat to Gwynfor, Margaret makes the speech that would define Thatcherism.
To those waiting with bated breath for that favourite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
Some regarded it as the ultimate hypocrisy. Others saw it as an emphatic warning. In her first year as Prime Minister, Margaret may have lost one battle to an elderly politician from the west of Wales. She would never lose again. In Gwynfor vs. Margaret by Rob Gittins, Gwynfor Evans was played by Robert Blythe. Nicholas Edwards and David Ellis-Thomas by Steffan Rodri. Rhiannon by Sharon Morgan. Cledwyn Hughes by Richard Elvin. And William Whitelaw by Malcolm Tierney. The narrator was Airy Thomas. Gwynfor vs. Margaret was a BBC Cymru Wales production, directed by James Robinson.